Before we get into the story, leave a comment and let us know what city you're watching from. And don't forget to rate the story from 0 to 10 at the end. Enjoy the story. The coffee shop on Fifth Avenue was bustling with the usual Friday afternoon crowd. Laptop warriors typed furiously. First dates fumbled through awkward small talk, and the espresso machine hissed like an angry cat. Madison Carter sat in the corner booth, her leg bouncing under the table so hard she nearly knocked over her untouched latte. Her phone buzzed for the third time in 2 minutes. Another text from her mother. "Madison, did you leave yet?" "Don't be rude to Bradley. His father owns half of Connecticut." She groaned and shoved the phone face down on the table. Bradley Ashton III. Even his name sounded like a yacht club membership. Her mother had been setting up this blind date for weeks, convinced that Madison's single status at 26 was some kind of family emergency. But Madison had seen Bradley's social media. Polo shirts, golf tournaments, a smile that screamed, "I've never been told no in my life." She would rather eat glass than sit through 2 hours of listening to him talk about his trust fund. The door chimed. Madison's heart seized. A tall figure entered, scanning the room. Broad shoulders, expensive watch. Oh God, he was early panic, shot through her veins like ice water. She grabbed her phone, her purse, her coat, nearly upending the table in her scramble to escape. But the front door was blocked. Bradley, or whoever that was standing right there, looking around with the confidence of someone who'd never had to wait for anything. Madison's eyes darted around the cafe, the bathroom, the kitchen, the back exit. Then she saw it. A second door near the storage room, half hidden behind a potted plant. She bolted. Her heel caught on the chair leg and she stumbled forward, catching herself against the wall. Smooth Madison. Real smooth. She pushed through the door and found herself in a narrow hallway that smelled faintly of cardboard and old pastries. At the far end, another door. Freedom. She burst through it and collided directly into someone. A man. A very solid man. Madison bounced backward, her purse flying open, scattering receipts and lip gloss across the alley floor. Sorry, I didn't see you," she stammered, crouching down to gather her things. The man crouched with her, his voice low and smooth. In a hurry? She glanced up and froze. He was gorgeous. Dark hair swept back, sharp jawline, eyes the color of stormy seas. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her rent, and he looked at her with a mix of amusement and curiosity. Madison's brain short-circuited. "I, was just Madison Carter?" a voice called from behind her. She spun around. A woman in her 50s stood in the doorway of the building next door, clipboard in hand, glasses perched on her nose. "You're here for the interview, correct?" "Interview?" Madison blinked. The woman frowned. "The executive assistant position? You emailed yesterday saying you'd be here at 3. Madison opened her mouth to say, "I think you have the wrong person," but then she heard it. The chime of the coffee shop door. Footsteps. A male voice calling out, "Excuse me, has anyone seen a blonde woman? About this tall? She was supposed to meet me." Madison's stomach dropped. Bradley. The gorgeous man beside her was still watching, one brow arched in silent question. The woman with the clipboard checked her watch impatiently. "If you're not interested, I have 4 other candidates waiting." "No," the word burst out of Madison before she could stop it. "I'm interested. I'm very interested. I'm here. Let's do this." The woman nodded curtly. "Follow me." Madison shot one last glance at the man in the alley. He was smiling now, a slow, knowing curve of his lips. "Good luck," he said, his voice rich with humor. She had no idea why, but her cheeks burned as she hurried after the woman, leaving her disaster of a morning, and one very attractive stranger behind the building was sleek and modern, all glass and steel and minimalist furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum. Madison's heartbeat hadn't slowed since she'd fled the coffee shop. She was now pretending to be someone else, interviewing for a job she hadn't applied for, all to avoid a blind date. This is insane. This is absolutely insane. The woman led her into a pristine conference room. Sit. I'll let Mr. Donovan know you're here. Madison's throat tightened. Donovan? As in Donovan Enterprises? As in the billionaire tech mogul whose face was on the cover of Forbes last month? Oh no, no. She stood abruptly. Actually, I think there's been a mistake. I should just... The door opened. And in walked the man from the alley. Madison's mouth fell open. He stopped in the doorway, his eyes locking onto hers. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then slowly, that same amused smile spread across his face. Miss Carter, he said, his voice smooth as silk. What a pleasant surprise. Her heart slammed against her ribs. You're Donovan. He stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. His presence filled the space, commanding and effortless. Ethan Donovan. And you, he tilted his head slightly, are apparently interviewing to be my assistant. Madison wanted to sink into the floor, to evaporate, to wake up and discover this was all some caffeine-induced nightmare I can explain, she started. But he raised a hand. No need. Please, sit. She sat, mostly because her legs had turned to jelly. Ethan took the seat across from her, folding his hands on the table. His gaze was sharp, assessing, but there was a flicker of something else beneath it. Amusement, curiosity. So, he began, leaning back in his chair. Tell me, Miss Carter, why do you want this job? Madison's mind raced. She could confess, tell him the truth, apologize and run. Or she could commit to the bit. She straightened her shoulders, meeting his gaze head on. Because I'm incredibly organized, detail-oriented, and I don't scare easily. Even when billionaires ambush me in alleyways, his smile widened. Impressive. And your previous experience? She hesitated for only a fraction of a second. I've worked in high-pressure environments, client relations, event coordination. I'm adaptable, quick on my feet, clearly. Madison's cheeks flushed, but she held his stare. Ethan studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he leaned forward, his elbows resting on the table. Here's the thing, Miss Carter. I don't believe for a second that you're actually here for this job. Her breath caught. But, he continued, voice dropping slightly, I'm intrigued. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to work for me for 1 week. If you impress me, we'll talk terms. If you don't, he shrugged. You walk away. No hard feelings. Madison stared at him. You're serious? Completely. She should say no. She should stand up, apologize, and leave before this spiraled further out of control. But then she thought about Bradley waiting at the coffee shop, about her mother's relentless matchmaking, about the fact that for the first time in months, she felt something other than bored. Fine, she heard herself say 1 week. Ethan extended his hand across the table. Deal. She shook it. His grip was firm, warm, and sent an unexpected jolt up her arm. As their hands lingered a moment too long, Madison realized with sinking certainty that she had just made either the best or worst decision of her life. Welcome aboard, Ethan said, his eyes gleaming. Try not to run into any more walls. Madison spent the weekend in a state of low-grade panic. She had lied her way into a job with a billionaire who was also unfairly attractive and clearly knew she was full of it. What was she thinking? By Monday morning, she had changed outfits 4 times, overthought every possible scenario, and seriously considered faking her own death. But at 8:55, she stood in front of the towering glass building that housed Donovan Enterprises, clutching a coffee like it was a life raft. You can do this, Parker. Wait. No. You're Madison. God, I'm already losing it. The lobby was a cathedral of modern architecture. Marble floors, soaring ceilings. A receptionist who looked like she moonlighted as a runway model. Madison approached the desk, trying to project confidence she absolutely did not feel. Hi, I'm Madison Carter. I'm here to see Mr. Donovan. The receptionist's perfectly sculpted brow lifted. You're the new assistant? Her tone suggested she'd already placed bets on how long Madison would last. That's me. 30th floor. He's expecting you. The elevator ride felt like it lasted an eternity. When the doors finally opened, Madison stepped into a sprawling office space that screamed power and money. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. Sleek desks were arranged in perfect rows, and everyone moved with the kind of purpose that made her feel like a lost freshman on the first day of college, Miss Carter. She turned. Ethan stood in the doorway of a corner office, dressed in a navy suit that fit him like a second skin. His expression was unreadable, but there was a glint in his eyes that made her stomach flip. You're on time. I'm impressed. Don't be, she muttered. I've been awake since 5 having an existential crisis. He smirked. Come on, I'll show you your desk. Her desk turned out to be directly outside his office, a sleek glass surface, 2 monitors, and a leather chair that probably cost more than her car. This is where you'll be stationed, Ethan said, leaning against the doorframe. Your job is simple. Manage my schedule. Screen my calls. Keep me organized. And he paused, his gaze locking onto hers. Try not to run away again. Madison's cheeks burned. That was a one-time thing. Was it? She glared at him. Are you going to hold that over my head for the entire week? He grinned. Probably. Before she could respond, a woman in a razor-sharp pantsuit strode over, her heels clicking like gunfire. Ethan, we need to talk about the Singapore deal. The contracts are a mess, and Ethan held up a hand. Vanessa, meet Madison. My new assistant Vanessa's eyes swept over Madison with the precision of a laser scanner. Her smile was thin, polite, and utterly devoid of warmth. How lovely another assistant. Let's hope this one lasts longer than the previous 3. 3? Madison's stomach sank. Vanessa didn't wait for a response. She turned back to Ethan, launching into a rapid-fire discussion about mergers and acquisitions that made Madison's head spin. Ethan listened intently, occasionally nodding, his expression shifting into what Madison could only describe as CEO mode, sharp, focused, intimidating. When Vanessa finally left, Madison exhaled. She seems nice. Ethan snorted. Vanessa's my head of acquisitions. She eats people for breakfast, Madison grimaced. Good to know. The rest of the morning was a blur. Phone calls, emails, scheduling meetings. Madison quickly realized that being Ethan Donovan's assistant was like trying to juggle flaming swords while riding a unicycle blindfolded. By noon, her head was pounding. Ethan emerged from his office, shrugging into his jacket. We have lunch with a client. You're coming. She blinked. I am. He didn't slow down. Keep up, Carter. The restaurant was the kind of place where the menu didn't have prices, and the waiters looked like they judged your net worth by your shoes. Madison felt wildly out of place. Ethan, however, moved through the space like he owned it, because he probably does. They were seated at a private table near the window. Across from them sat a silver-haired man in his 60s, his expression shrewd and assessing. Richard, Ethan said smoothly, shaking the man's hand. Good to see you. Richard's gaze slid to Madison. And who's this? My assistant, Ethan said. Madison Carter. Richard's smile didn't reach his eyes. Assistant, how quickly they come and go. Madison bristled but kept her mouth shut. The lunch was brutal. Richard peppered Ethan with questions about projections, market shares, risk assessments. Ethan answered each one with calm precision. never faltering. At one point, Richard turned to Madison. "So, Miss Carter, what do you think of Ethan's proposal?" Her heart stopped. She had no idea what proposal he was talking about, but Ethan's gaze flicked to her, something unreadable in his eyes. "Go ahead," he said quietly. Madison swallowed. Then, on pure instinct, she leaned forward. "I think it's bold, but bold is what disrupts industries. Playing it safe might protect your assets short-term, but innovation requires risk. And if there's one thing Mr. Donovan doesn't do, it's play it safe." Silence. Richard stared at her. Ethan's expression was unreadable. Then, slowly, Richard smiled. "I like her. She's got fire." Ethan's lips curved. "She does." The rest of the lunch passed in a blur. When they finally left, Madison's hands were still shaking. That was she started, but Ethan cut her off. "Brilliant." She blinked. "What?" "You handled Richard perfectly. He's a shark. Most people fold under his questions. But you—" He looked at her, something warm flickering in his gaze. "You didn't flinch." Madison's chest tightened. I had no idea what I was talking about. Ethan chuckled. Neither did I half the time. But confidence sells. They walked back to the office in silence. Madison's mind was spinning. She'd survived her first day. Barely. But she'd survived. As they stepped into the elevator, Ethan glanced at her. "You know," he said casually, "I still don't believe you're here for the job." Her pulse quickened. "Then why are you keeping me around?" He smiled, slow and devastatingly. "Because I want to know what you're really running from." The elevator doors closed, and Madison realized with sinking clarity that she was in far deeper than she'd ever intended. By Wednesday, Madison had developed a system. Wake up early, drink obscene amounts of coffee, pretend she knew what she was doing. Repeat. Surprisingly, it was working. She'd mastered Ethan's schedule, learned the names of at least half the people who worked on the 30th floor, and had only accidentally hung up on one important client progress. But the real challenge wasn't the job, it was Ethan. He had a way of looking at her that made her feel like he could see straight through every lie she'd ever told. And worse, he seemed to enjoy it. That morning, Madison was sorting through a mountain of emails when Ethan appeared beside her desk. His presence was immediate, magnetic. She glanced up, trying to ignore the way her heart did a stupid little flip. "Morning." He set a cup of coffee down in front of her. 2 sugars. No cream. She stared at the cup. "How did you—" She'd mentioned her coffee order exactly once, in passing on Monday. Ethan shrugged. "I pay attention." Before she could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and frowned. "Change of plans. We're going to a charity gala tonight." Madison blinked. "We? You're my assistant. You're coming." "But I don't have anything to wear to a gala." Ethan smirked. "I'll take care of it." And just like that, he disappeared back into his office, leaving Madison sitting there with her mouth hanging open. At 5 o'clock, a garment bag appeared at her desk. Inside was a dress. A stunning midnight blue gown that probably cost more than her entire wardrobe combined. There was a note attached in Ethan's sharp, angular handwriting. "Wear this. Car picks you up at 7. Madison's hands trembled as she held the dress up. This was insane. All of it. She should quit. Walk away. Go back to her normal, boring, non-billionaire invaded life. But instead, she went home and got ready. The car that picked her up was a sleek black sedan with leather seats and a driver who didn't say a single word. When they arrived at the venue, a historic hotel dripping in old money elegance, Madison's nerves were vibrating like live wires. The ballroom was breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers, marble columns, women in gowns that sparkled like starlight, and men in tuxedos that cost more than most people's cars. Madison felt like an imposter. Ethan was waiting near the entrance. When he saw her, he went still. His gaze swept over her, slow and deliberate, and something flickered in his eyes. Heat. Appreciation. Something that made her skin flush. "You look." He paused, his voice rougher than usual. "Incredible." Madison's breath caught. "You don't look so bad yourself." He was in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, the kind that made him look like he'd stepped out of a cologne ad. Dangerous and elegant in equal measure. He offered his arm. "Shall we?" She hesitated for only a second, before slipping her hand into the crook of his elbow. The moment they entered the ballroom, eyes turned. Whispers followed. Ethan Donovan with a woman? Who is she? Madison's stomach churned, but Ethan seemed utterly unbothered. He guided her through the crowd with ease, stopping occasionally to exchange pleasantries with people whose names Madison vaguely recognized from Forbes, covers, and financial news. At one point, a woman in a red dress approached. Her smile was sharp, predatory. "Ethan, darling. I didn't know you were bringing someone." Ethan's expression didn't change, Angela. "This is Madison." "My date." Angela's eyes narrowed, sweeping over Madison like she was evaluating livestock. "How nice." Madison forced a smile lovely to meet you. When Angela finally drifted away, Madison exhaled. "She seems friendly." Ethan chuckled. "She's my ex." Madison nearly choked on her champagne. "Your what?" Ethan shrugged. "It was years ago. Didn't end well." Madison glanced back at Angela, who was now watching them from across the room with a look that could curdle milk. "Yeah, I'm getting that vibe." The rest of the evening was a whirlwind. Dancing, small talk, more champagne than Madison probably should have consumed. But the strangest part was how natural it felt. Being beside Ethan, laughing at his dry humor, feeling his hand on the small of her back as he guided her through the crowd. At one point, they ended up on the balcony, the cool night air a welcome relief from the stifling ballroom. Madison leaned against the railing, looking out at the glittering city below. "This is surreal," she murmured. Ethan stood beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "Which part?" "All of it. A week ago, I was running away from a blind date. Now I'm pretending to be your assistant at a gala." He turned to face her, his expression serious. "Who says you're pretending?" Her heart stuttered. "What?" Ethan stepped closer. "You've done more in 3 days than my last 3 assistants did in 3 months. You're sharp, quick. You don't take anyone's nonsense, not even mine." Madison swallowed hard. "I lied to you." "You did," he agreed. "But I think you're lying about more than just the job." Her pulse raced. "What do you mean?" He studied her, his gaze intense. "I think you're running from something. Or someone. And I think you're using this job as an escape." Madison's breath hitched. She wanted to deny it, to laugh it off. But the truth was lodged in her throat, heavy and undeniable. Before she could respond, a voice called from the doorway. "Ethan!" They both turned. Vanessa stood there, her expression tight. "We have a problem." Ethan's jaw clenched. "What kind of problem?" "The kind that requires you inside." "Now." He glanced at Madison, something apologetic in his eyes. "I'll be right back." She nodded, watching as he disappeared inside. Alone on the balcony, Madison exhaled shakily. Her hands were trembling, not from the cold, but from the way Ethan had looked at her, like he saw her, really saw her. And God help her, she wasn't sure if that terrified her or thrilled her. When Ethan finally returned, his expression was stormy. "We need to leave. Is everything okay?" He didn't answer, just took her hand and led her back through the ballroom. The car ride back was silent, tension humming between them. When they pulled up outside her apartment, Ethan finally spoke. "I'm sorry." Tonight didn't go the way I planned. Madison looked at him, her chest tight. What did you plan? He met her gaze, and for a moment, she saw something raw in his eyes. Vulnerability. Want. To tell you the truth. Her breath caught. Which is? That I didn't bring you tonight because you're my assistant. I brought you because I wanted you there. The admission hung between them, electric and dangerous. Madison's heart hammered. Ethan, she started, but he shook his head. You don't have to say anything. Just think about it. He got out, opened her door, and walked her to the entrance of her building. His hand lingered on hers for a moment too long. Good night, Madison. She watched him walk away, her thoughts a chaotic mess. When she finally collapsed onto her couch, she realized one terrifying truth. She wasn't pretending anymore. Madison didn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Ethan's face on that balcony, heard his voice. I wanted you there. By the time her alarm went off Thursday morning, she'd convinced herself she'd imagined the whole thing, that the champagne had made her read too much into a simple statement. Except when she arrived at the office, Ethan was different. Not cold, but careful, like he was holding something back. Morning, he said, barely looking up from his computer. Morning. The day passed in uncomfortable silence, no banter, no lingering glances, just work. By noon, Madison wanted to scream. That afternoon, Vanessa appeared at her desk, arms crossed, conference room. Now, Madison blinked. Me? Vanessa's smile was razor thin. Yes, you. Confused, Madison followed her into the glass-walled conference room. Inside were 4 other people, all looking equally confused. Vanessa closed the door and turned to face them, her expression all business. As some of you may know, we're launching a new initiative next quarter. I need a team to coordinate the rollout. Madison's stomach sank. Wait, I'm not. She was cut off as Vanessa launched into a detailed explanation involving market analysis, stakeholder engagement, and about 15 other terms Madison only vaguely understood. But as Vanessa spoke, something clicked. Madison had done event coordination before. Client relations. She knew how to manage logistics, handle personalities, keep things on track. By the end of the meeting, she'd somehow volunteered to lead the communications arm of the project. When everyone filed out, Vanessa lingered. You surprised me, she said, her tone grudgingly approving. Most assistants don't last 2 days, let alone step up for something like this. Madison shrugged, trying to hide her panic. I'm not most assistants. Vanessa's lips twitched. No, you're not. That evening, as Madison was packing up her things, Ethan finally emerged from his office. You're working on Vanessa's project. It wasn't a question. Word travels fast. He leaned against her desk, his expression unreadable. You didn't have to do that, I wanted to. Why? Madison met his gaze. Because I'm tired of people assuming I can't handle things. Ethan studied her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he smiled. That's the Madison I was hoping to see. Her heart skipped. Before she could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it and frowned. I have to take this. But he paused, his hand resting on her desk. We should talk. About what? He held her gaze. You know what. Then he was gone, leaving Madison sitting there with her pulse racing and her thoughts in chaos. That weekend, Madison threw herself into research for Vanessa's project. She mapped out timelines, drafted communication strategies, even put together a presentation deck. It was easier than thinking about Ethan, easier than dissecting every word, every look, every moment that made her chest ache in ways she didn't want to examine. But Monday morning, everything exploded. Madison arrived at the office to find it in chaos. People rushing between desks, phones ringing non-stop, Vanessa barking orders like a drill sergeant. What's going on? Madison asked one of the junior analysts. Hostile takeover attempt, he said, eyes wide. Someone's trying to buy out Donovan Enterprises. Madison's stomach dropped. Where's Ethan? Conference room. He's been in there since 6. She didn't think, just grabbed her tablet and headed straight for the conference room. Through the glass walls, she could see Ethan surrounded by lawyers and executives. His expression was carved from stone. She knocked. Every head turned. Ethan's eyes locked onto hers, and for a second, something softened. He stood, excusing himself, and stepped into the hallway. You shouldn't be here, he said quietly. I know. But I thought you might need this. She handed him her tablet. On the screen was a detailed breakdown of the company's recent acquisitions, market positioning, and a list of potential allies who could help block the takeover. She'd spent the entire weekend compiling it. Ethan stared at the screen, then at her. How did you? She shrugged. I pay attention. His jaw tightened. For a moment, she thought he might send her away. Then instead, he pulled her into the conference room. Everyone, this is Madison Carter. She's going to walk us through some strategic options. Madison's heart nearly stopped. What? Ethan's gaze was steady, trusting. You can do this. So she did. She walked a room full of lawyers and executives through her analysis, fielding questions, adjusting strategies on the fly. It was terrifying, exhilarating. And by the end, even Vanessa looked grudgingly impressed. When the meeting finally wrapped, Ethan caught her arm. My office. Now. Her stomach flipped. They stepped inside and he closed the door. For a long moment, he just looked at her. That was he started, then shook his head. Incredible. You're incredible. Madison's breath caught. I wanted to help, I know. His voice was rough, but you didn't have to. You could have walked away from all of this. From me. She met his gaze. Maybe I don't want to walk away. The air between them shifted, charged, dangerous. Ethan stepped closer. His hand came up, fingers brushing her jaw. Do you have any idea what you do to me? Her pulse thundered. Ethan, he kissed her. It was sudden, fierce, and it stole every coherent thought from her head. His hands framed her face, his mouth moving against hers with a hunger that made her knees weak. Madison melted into him, her fingers clutching his shirt, her heart slamming against her ribs. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. Ethan rested his forehead against hers. I shouldn't have done that. She smiled, breathless. I'm not complaining. He laughed, low and rough. God, Madison, what am I going to do with you? She pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. Figure it out. Because I'm not going anywhere. His smile was slow, devastating. Good. Because neither am I. The rest of the week passed in a blur of meetings, strategy sessions, and stolen glances that made Madison's stomach flip every single time. The hostile takeover attempt was thwarted. Ethan's team had rallied, allies had been secured, and the company emerged stronger than before. But the real shift wasn't in the boardroom. It was between her and Ethan. They hadn't kissed again, hadn't talked about what happened in his office. But the tension was there, simmering just below the surface. Every accidental brush of hands, every moment their eyes met across the room. It was driving Madison insane. On Friday evening, as the office finally emptied out, Ethan appeared at her desk. Dinner? Madison looked up, her heart skipping. Is this a work dinner or? She trailed off, unsure how to finish that sentence. He smiled. Does it matter? She grabbed her coat. Not even a little. They ended up at a small Italian restaurant tucked away in a quiet neighborhood. No photographers, no business associates, just the two of them, a bottle of wine, and food that tasted like heaven. So, Ethan said, leaning back in his chair, his gaze warm and assessing. Are you ever going to tell me the real reason you ran into that alley? Madison nearly choked on her pasta. Wow, straight for the jugular. He shrugged. I'm curious. She set down her fork, debating. Then, with a sigh, she gave in. Fine, I was supposed to meet someone. A blind date my mother set up. And I saw him walk into the coffee shop and panicked. Ethan's brow lifted. That bad? Madison grimaced. Let's just say polo shirts and trust funds aren't really my thing. He laughed, the sound rich and genuine. So you decided to crash a job interview instead. It seemed like the better option at the time. And now? Now she met his gaze, her pulse quickening. So I'm having dinner with a billionaire who somehow convinced me to work for him under completely false pretenses. Ethan's smile was slow, dangerous. Sounds like you made the right choice. Madison's cheeks flushed. She took a sip of wine, trying to steady herself. What about you? She asked. Why did you really hire me? You had to know I wasn't qualified. He leaned forward, his eyes never leaving hers. Because you were interesting. Most people walk into my office terrified, or trying to impress me. You just looked like you wanted to bolt. It was refreshing. Madison shook her head, laughing. That's one way to put it. Ethan reached across the table, his hand covering hers. I'm glad you stayed. Her breath caught. Me too. The rest of dinner passed in easy conversation. They talked about everything and nothing. Her childhood in a small town, his relentless upbringing in boarding schools, her failed attempts at learning to cook, his inexplicable love for terrible action movies. It felt normal. Easy. Like they'd known each other far longer than a week. When they finally left the restaurant, the city was alive with lights and noise. They walked slowly, side by side, neither of them ready for the night to end. Madison, she started, but he turned to her, his expression serious. I need to tell you something. Her heart thudded. Okay, I wasn't entirely honest with you. About what? About why I kept you around. He stopped walking, facing her fully. Yes, you're good at the job. Yes, you're smart and capable. But the real reason he paused, his jaw tightening, is because I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since the moment you crashed into me in that alley. Madison's breath stuttered. Ethan, every interaction, every conversation, every time you challenged me or made me laugh, or looked at me like I'm not just some untouchable CEO. He stepped closer. It made me want things I haven't wanted in years. Her chest felt too tight. What things? You, he said simply. His hand came up, fingers tracing her jaw. I want you, Madison. And I know this is complicated. I know we started this all wrong. But I don't care. Her heart was a wild thing, thrashing against her ribs. She should be scared, should pull back. But instead, she leaned into his touch. I want you too. Ethan's eyes darkened. He closed the distance between them, his mouth capturing hers. In a kiss that was slower this time, deeper, and it made her feel like she was falling. When they finally broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. Come home with me. It wasn't a command. It was a question. A choice. Madison's pulse raced. She knew what she was agreeing to, knew this changed everything. Okay. His apartment was everything she expected. Sleek, modern, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. But she barely noticed. The moment the door closed behind them, Ethan's hands were on her, framing her face, sliding into her hair. His mouth found hers again, and this time there was no hesitation. No holding back. Madison's fingers fumbled with the buttons of his shirt. He shrugged out of his jacket, his hands finding the zipper of her dress. Are you sure? He murmured against her lips. She pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. I've never been more sure of anything. That was all the confirmation he needed. He lifted her, and she wrapped her legs around his waist as he carried her down the hall. The rest of the night was a blur of heat and need, and the overwhelming sense that something fundamental had shifted between them. When Madison woke the next morning, sunlight was streaming through the windows. She was tangled in Ethan's sheets, his arm draped over her waist. For a moment, panic flared. What have I done? But then Ethan stirred beside her. His eyes opened, and when he saw her, he smiled. A real, unguarded smile that made her chest ache. "Morning. Morning," she whispered. He pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her forehead. No regrets? She thought about it. About the lies, the chaos, the absolute insanity of the past week. Then she smiled. None. Good. Because I'm not letting you go. And as Madison lay there in his arms, the city waking up beyond the windows, she realized with startling clarity that she didn't want him to. Reality, unfortunately, had a way of crashing back in. By Monday morning, the entire office was buzzing. Ethan Donovan and his assistant. The whispers followed Madison everywhere. She caught the stares, the raised eyebrows, the barely concealed smirks. Vanessa cornered her by the coffee machine, her expression unreadable. "So, you and Ethan," Madison's stomach twisted. "It's not, we," she trailed off, unsure what to say. Vanessa sipped her coffee. "Relax. I'm not here to lecture you. I just hope you know what you're doing." Madison frowned. What's that supposed to mean? Vanessa's gaze was sharp. Ethan doesn't do relationships. He does work. The last woman who got close to him? Let's just say it didn't end well. Madison's chest tightened, but she forced herself to stay calm. "Thanks for the concern." "But I can handle myself." Vanessa's lips curved into a faint smile. "We'll see." The rest of the day was a minefield. Madison threw herself into work, trying to ignore the gossip. But it was impossible. Every glance felt loaded. Every conversation felt like a test. That afternoon, Ethan called her into his office. His expression was tense. "We need to talk." Her heart sank. "Okay." He ran a hand through his hair, a rare sign of frustration. "People are talking." "I know." "Madison, I don't want this to affect your job or your reputation." She crossed her arms. "And what about us?" He met her gaze, conflict warring in his eyes. "I don't know. Maybe we moved too fast." Her stomach dropped. "Are you saying you regret it?" "No," he said quickly. "God, no. But I don't want you to become a target because of me." Madison stepped closer. "I knew what I was getting into, Ethan. I'm not some fragile thing that needs protecting." He reached for her, his hand cupping her face. "I know, but that doesn't mean I won't try." Before she could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it and swore under his breath. "What?" "It's my mother. She's in town, and she wants to meet you." Madison's eyes widened. "Your what?" Ethan sighed. "My mother? She heard about you. Probably from Vanessa's network of gossips, and now she's insisting on dinner. Tonight." Panic flared. "Tonight? As in a few hours from now?" He nodded grimly. "I tried to put her off, but Elena Donovan doesn't take no for an answer." Madison paced the length of his office. Okay, I can do this. It's just dinner. With your billionaire mother, who probably thinks I'm some gold-digging opportunist." Ethan caught her hand, pulling her to a stop. "She's going to love you." Madison looked at him skeptically. "You don't sound convinced." He smiled faintly. "My mother is terrifying, but you're tougher than you think." That evening, Madison changed outfits 6 times before settling on a simple black dress. Professional, not too flashy. "Please God, let this go well." Ethan picked her up, and they drove to an upscale restaurant where his mother was already waiting. Elena Donovan was a force of nature. Perfectly coiffed silver hair, designer clothes, eyes that missed absolutely nothing. She stood as they approached, her gaze sweeping over Madison with surgical precision. "So, you're the assistant." Madison forced a smile. "Madison Carter. It's lovely to meet you, Mrs. Donovan." Elena's lips curved. "Call me Elena, Mrs. Donovan, makes me sound ancient." They sat. The first 10 minutes were polite small talk, but then Elena leaned forward, her gaze locking onto Madison. "Tell me, dear, what exactly are your intentions with my son?" Madison nearly choked on her water. I'm sorry." Ethan stiffened. Mother Elena waved a hand. "Oh, don't mother me, Ethan. I'm simply asking a reasonable question." Madison's mind raced. Then, summoning every ounce of courage, she met Elena's gaze head-on. "With all due respect, Elena, I'm not sure I have intentions. Ethan and I were figuring things out. But I can promise you, I'm not here for his money or his name. I'm here because I care about him." Silence. Elena studied her. Then, slowly, her expression softened. "Good. Because the last woman who dated my son was only interested in his bank account. I'd hate to see him hurt again." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Can we not?" The rest of the dinner was surprisingly pleasant. Elena asked about Madison's background, her goals, her thoughts on everything from politics to literature. By the end, Madison felt like she'd just survived a job interview. As they left, Elena pulled Madison aside. "You're good for him," she said quietly. "He's different with you. Lighter. Don't let him push you away." Madison blinked. "I won't." Elena smiled. "Good." In the car, Ethan exhaled heavily. "That went better than I expected." Madison laughed. "Your mom is intense." He glanced at her, a smile tugging at his lips. "She liked you." "Really?" He took her hand. "Really?" When they got back to his apartment, the tension from earlier had evaporated. Ethan pulled her into his arms, his mouth finding hers in a kiss that was both tender and desperate. "I'm sorry," he murmured against her lips. "For what? For doubting us. For worrying about what people think." Madison pulled back, framing his face with her hands. "We'll figure it out. Together." He smiled, pressing his forehead to hers. Together. That night, as they lay tangled together, Madison realized something she'd stopped running. For the first time in a long time, she wanted to stay. The following weeks felt like living in a dream. Madison's role at Donovan Enterprises evolved. She wasn't just Ethan's assistant anymore. She was coordinating major projects, sitting in on strategy meetings, and somehow becoming an actual part of the team. But the best part? The moments stolen between meetings. Ethan's hand brushing hers under the conference table. The way his eyes sought her out across the room. The late nights in his office that turned into early mornings at his apartment. It felt real. Solid. Until it didn't. It started with a phone call. Madison was at her desk when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Hello?" Madison Carter. A woman's voice, smooth, confident. "Yes?" "This is Jennifer Hayes. I'm a reporter with the Financial Tribune. I was hoping to ask you a few questions about your relationship with Ethan Donovan." Madison's blood ran cold. "I don't..." Before she could finish, the line went dead. She stared at her phone, panic rising. "Ethan," she said, bursting into his office. "We have a problem." He looked up from his laptop. "What's wrong?" "A reporter just called me, asking about us." Ethan's expression darkened. "What did you say?" "Nothing." I hung up. "But Ethan, if they're digging," he stood, pacing to the window. This was bound to happen eventually. Madison's stomach twisted. "What do you mean?" His jaw tightened. "My life isn't private, Madison. Everything I do gets scrutinized. And now that you're part of it," fear lanced through her. "You think they'll come after me?" He turned to face her. "I think they'll try to find anything they can." Your past, your family, any mistake you've ever made. Madison felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. My past? Ethan crossed to her, his hands gentle on her shoulders. I'm not trying to scare you, but you need to be prepared. She pulled away, her mind racing. There's something I need to tell you. His brow furrowed. What? Madison took a deep breath. The reason I was running from that blind date wasn't just because I didn't want to go. It's because my mother has been trying to set me up with rich men for years. She thinks if I marry someone wealthy, it'll fix everything. Fix what? Madison's throat tightened. My family's broke, Ethan. We lost everything when I was in college. My dad's business failed. We had to sell the house. My mom, she's been obsessed with me marrying up ever since. She thinks it's the only way to get back what we lost. Ethan stared at her. And you thought I'd judge you for that? She shrugged helplessly. I don't know. Maybe. I didn't want you to think I was like the others. Like I was only with you for your money. He pulled her into his arms. Madison, I don't care about any of that. But why didn't you tell me? Because I was scared, she admitted, her voice breaking. Scared that if you knew the truth, you'd see me differently. Ethan tilted her chin up, his gaze fierce. I see you exactly the way you are, smart, strong, stubborn as hell, and I'm not letting you go. Tears stung her eyes. Even if the press tears us apart, especially then. But the press didn't wait. By the next morning, the story was everywhere. Ethan Donovan's mystery woman. Who is Madison Carter? The headlines were brutal. Gold digger, social climber, opportunist. Madison sat in Ethan's apartment, scrolling through article after article, each one more vicious than the last. Her phone wouldn't stop ringing. Unknown numbers, reporters, even old acquaintances crawling out of the woodwork. Ethan paced the length of the living room, his phone pressed to his ear, as he barked orders at his PR team. When he finally hung up, he looked exhausted. We'll issue a statement. Set the record straight. Madison shook her head. It won't matter. They've already made up their minds. He sat beside her, taking her hands. Then we'll prove them wrong. She looked at him, her chest aching. How? By not hiding. By showing them that what we have is real. Madison wanted to believe him. But when she checked her phone again, her stomach dropped. There was a message from her mother. We need to talk now, she showed Ethan. His jaw tightened. Do you want me to come with you? Madison shook her head. No, I need to do this alone. Her mother's apartment was exactly as she remembered, small, cluttered, filled with the ghosts of better days. Her mother opened the door, her expression tight. So, you've been keeping secrets. Madison stepped inside. Mom, I saw the articles. Her mother cut her off. Ethan Donovan, a billionaire, Madison. Do you have any idea what this could mean for us? Madison's heart sank. That's all you care about? The money? Her mother's face hardened. Don't act self-righteous. You know what we've been through. If you marry him, it's not about that, Madison snapped. I'm not marrying him for money. I love him. Her mother laughed bitterly. Love doesn't pay bills, Madison. Love doesn't fix broken credit. Madison felt something inside her crack. You know what? I'm done. Done with what? With this. With you trying to control my life. With you treating me like a meal ticket. She turned toward the door, but her mother's voice stopped her. If you walk away now, don't expect me to be here when you need me. Madison looked back, tears streaming down her face. I stopped needing you a long time ago. She left. And as the door closed behind her, she felt something shift. Pain. Relief. Freedom. When she got back to Ethan's apartment, he took one look at her and pulled her into his arms. It's over, she whispered. She doesn't get to control me anymore. He held her tighter. I'm proud of you." That night, as they lay together, Madison realized something she'd been running her whole life. From expectations, from judgment, from anything that felt too real. But with Ethan, she didn't want to run anymore. The media frenzy didn't die down. If anything, it intensified. Photographers camped outside Ethan's building. Reporters shouted questions whenever Madison left for work. It was suffocating. But Ethan refused to let her face it alone. He issued a public statement. Clear, direct, unapologetic. "Madison Carter is not just my assistant. She's someone I deeply care about. And her personal life is none of your business." It didn't stop the speculation, but it helped. Slowly, other stories took over the news cycle. The pressure eased, but the damage had been done. Madison found herself questioning everything. One evening, as they sat on Ethan's couch, she finally voiced what had been gnawing at her. "Do you ever regret it? Meeting me?" Ethan looked at her like she'd lost her mind. Not for a second. Even with all the chaos? Even with your mother? The press? He pulled her closer. "Especially with all of that. Because it means you're real." Madison buried her face in his chest. "I don't know how you do it. Live under this microscope all the time." "You get used to it," he said quietly. "Or you find someone worth ignoring it for." She looked up at him. "Is that what I am? Worth ignoring it for?" He kissed her forehead. "You're worth everything." The following week, Vanessa approached Madison in the break room. "I owe you an apology." Madison blinked. For what? Vanessa's expression was uncharacteristically soft. "I underestimated you. I thought you were just another passing phase for Ethan. But you're not." Madison didn't know what to say. "Thank you?" Vanessa smirked. "Don't get used to it. But for what it's worth, you're good for him. He's different with you. Better." It was the closest thing to approval Madison had ever gotten from her. That night, Ethan surprised her. He took her to a rooftop garden overlooking the city. String lights glowed overhead. A small table was set with candles and wine. "What's all this?" Madison asked, breathless. Ethan pulled out her chair. "I realized we've never had a proper date, one without reporters, or business dinners, or family drama. Just us." Her heart swelled. Then they talked for hours about their childhoods, their dreams, the futures they'd imagined before life got complicated. And as the city sparkled below them, Madison realized she'd never felt more at peace. "I love you," she said suddenly. Ethan went still. "What?" "I love you," she repeated, her voice steady. "I know it's fast. I know this whole thing is insane. But I do. I love you." Ethan stood, pulling her to her feet. His hands framed her face, his eyes blazing. "I love you too," he said, his voice rough. "I've loved you since the moment you crashed into my life and turned everything upside down." He kissed her. Deep, consuming, a promise. When they finally pulled apart, Madison was breathless. "So what now?" Ethan smiled. "Now we stop pretending this is temporary." She laughed. "I thought we stopped pretending weeks ago." He pulled her close. "Then let's make it official." Madison's heart skipped. "What do you mean?" Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Her breath caught. "Are you?" She couldn't finish. He opened the box. Inside was a ring. Simple, elegant, perfect. "Madison Carter," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "I know this is crazy. I know we've only known each other a few months, but I don't want to waste another second. Marry me." Tears streamed down her face. "Yes." He blinked. "Yes?" She laughed through her tears. "Yes, you insane, wonderful man. Yes." He slid the ring onto her finger and kissed her like the world was ending, and she was the only thing holding it together. When they finally pulled apart, Madison looked down at the ring. It's beautiful. Ethan tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Not as beautiful as you. She rolled her eyes. That's the cheesiest thing you've ever said. He grinned. Get used to it. The next morning, they announced the engagement. The press went wild. But this time, Madison didn't care. Let them talk. Let them speculate. She had Ethan. And that was all that mattered. Vanessa cornered them in the hallway, arms crossed. Well, this is going to complicate HR policies. Ethan smirked. We'll figure it out. Vanessa shook her head, but she was smiling. Congratulations. Try not to let it ruin my quarterly projections. That weekend, Madison and Ethan flew to a quiet coastal town. No reporters, no distractions, just the two of them. They walked along the beach, hand in hand, the waves lapping at their feet. I can't believe this is real, Madison said. Ethan squeezed her hand. Believe it. She stopped, turning to face him. I'm glad I ran into that alley. He laughed. Best crash I've ever had. They stood there, the ocean stretching out before them, the future wide open and uncertain and utterly theirs. Madison had spent her whole life running, but now, with Ethan beside her, she finally felt like she'd found home. Planning a wedding while running a multi-billion-dollar company turned out to be significantly harder than Madison had anticipated. Ethan insisted on being involved in every detail, which would have been sweet if he didn't have opinions about centerpieces. I'm just saying, he argued, leaning back in his office chair. Roses are overdone. Madison looked up from her laptop. You're the CEO of a tech empire, and you have thoughts on floral arrangements? He shrugged. I contain multitudes. She threw a pen at him. He caught it, grinning. The wedding was set for late spring. Small, intimate, just family and close friends. Madison's mother had reached out twice. Both times, Madison ignored the calls. Ethan had encouraged her to reconcile, but Madison wasn't ready. Maybe she never would be. Are you sure you're okay with a small wedding? Madison asked one evening as they reviewed the guest list. Ethan looked at her like she'd grown a second head Madison. I'd marry you in a courthouse with 2 witnesses. This is already extravagant. She smiled. You're such a romantic. He pulled her into his lap. Only for you. The months leading up to the wedding flew by in a blur of meetings, dress fittings, and late-night planning sessions. Vanessa had taken over most of Madison's responsibilities at work, insisting that no bride should be coordinating corporate mergers 3 weeks before her wedding. You've done enough, Vanessa had said, shoving a stack of files at a junior associate. Go pick out flowers, or whatever brides do. Madison had hugged her. Vanessa had looked horrified. 2 weeks before the wedding, Elena Donovan arrived to help with final preparations. She swept into the apartment like a benevolent hurricane, immediately taking charge. Madison, darling, have you confirmed the catering? And what about the photographer? Please tell me you didn't hire someone off the internet. Madison laughed. It's all handled, Elena. Elena looked skeptical but softened. You're far more organized than I expected. Is that a compliment? The closest I give. The night before the wedding, Madison couldn't sleep. She stood by the window of Ethan's apartment, looking out at the city. Tomorrow, she'd be married. To Ethan Donovan. The thought was surreal, arms wrapped around her from behind. Can't sleep? Ethan murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. Madison leaned back against him, just thinking. About? She turned in his arms. About how a few months ago I was running away from a blind date. And now I'm marrying you. He smiled. Best decision you ever made. She swatted his chest. Confident much? He kissed her. Always. The wedding day dawned clear and bright. Madison stood in front of the mirror, staring at herself in the dress she'd chosen. It was simple, elegant, everything she'd wanted. Her sister, Claire, who had flown in from Seattle, zipped up the back. "You look beautiful," Claire said softly. Madison met her eyes in the mirror. "I'm terrified." Claire laughed. "That's normal. But if it helps, I've never seen you this happy." It did help. The ceremony took place in a garden overlooking the water. White chairs lined the aisle, flowers everywhere, string quartet playing softly. And at the end of the aisle, Ethan. He stood there in a perfectly tailored suit, his eyes locked on her the moment she appeared. Madison's breath caught. He looked at her like she was the only person in the world. As she walked toward him, everything else faded. The guests, the music, the nerves. It was just her and Ethan. When she reached him, he took her hand, his voice low. "Hi," she smiled. "Hi." The officiant began, but Madison barely heard the words. She was too busy memorizing this moment, the way Ethan's thumb brushed over her knuckles, the way his eyes never left hers. "Do you, Ethan Alexander Donovan, take Madison to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." His voice was steady. "Sure. Do you, Madison Rose Carter, take Ethan to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Madison's throat tightened. "I do." "Then, by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride." Ethan cupped her face, his smile blinding. Finally. He kissed her, and the world erupted in cheers. The reception was perfect. Laughter. Dancing speeches that made Madison cry and laugh in equal measure. Vanessa gave a toast that was surprisingly heartfelt. When Ethan Donovan hired Madison, I thought she'd last 2 days. Turns out she's the only person stubborn enough to keep him in line. To Madison, for making him human. Madison had laughed until her sides hurt. Late in the evening, Ethan pulled her onto the dance floor. They swayed together, the rest of the world a blur around them. "Mrs. Donovan," he murmured. "How does it feel?" She smiled. "Ask me again in 50 years. Deal." As the night wore on and guests began to leave, Madison stood with Ethan on the terrace. The city sparkled below them. "I can't believe we pulled this off," she said. Ethan wrapped his arms around her. "We make a good team." She leaned into him. "The best." They stood there in comfortable silence. Then Ethan spoke quietly. "Thank you." "For what?" "For crashing into my life. For staying. For making me believe in this." Madison turned in his arms, her eyes shining. "Thank you for catching me. Always." They kissed under the stars, the beginning of forever stretching out before them. Married life, Madison quickly discovered, was both everything and nothing like she'd expected. The transition from girlfriend to wife didn't feel dramatic. They still bickered over who left the coffee maker on, still stole each other's hoodies, still spent late nights working side by side. But there was something deeper now, something settled, a certainty that hadn't been there before. 3 months after the wedding, Madison sat in Ethan's office, well, their office now, reviewing a proposal for a new charity initiative. Ethan had asked her to head it. A foundation focused on providing resources for families facing financial hardship. It felt personal, important, and terrifying. "You sure you want me running this?" Madison asked, glancing up at him. Ethan didn't look up from his screen. "Positive. But I don't have experience with—" She stopped when he finally met her gaze. "You have something better than experience," he said. "You have empathy. You understand what it's like to struggle. That's what this foundation needs." Her chest tightened. "Okay, I'll do it." "Good. Because I already announced you as the director." Madison threw a folder at him. He ducked, laughing. The first few months of running the foundation were chaotic. Madison threw herself into the work, building a team, reaching out to potential partners, developing programs. It was exhausting, fulfilling, and exactly what she needed. One afternoon, as she was deep in a budgeting spreadsheet, her phone rang, unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Hello." "Madison." It was her mother's voice. Madison's stomach clenched. She hadn't spoken to her mother since the confrontation months ago. "What do you want?" There was a long pause. "I saw the news. About your foundation." Madison's jaw tightened. "And?" I wanted to say. Her mother's voice cracked. "I'm proud of you." The words hit Madison like a punch. She sat frozen, unsure how to respond. "Mom, I know I've been terrible," her mother continued. "I know I pushed you. I made everything about money, about status, and I'm sorry." Madison's throat burned. "Why now?" "Because I realized I was about to lose you for good, and I don't want that." Madison closed her eyes, tears slipping free. "I don't know if I can forgive you. I'm not asking you to, not yet. But maybe someday we can start over." Madison was quiet for a long moment. Then, softly, she said, "Maybe." It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a start. That night, she told Ethan about the call. He listened without interrupting, then pulled her into his arms. "How do you feel?" "Confused," Madison admitted, but also relieved. He kissed the top of her head. "Whatever you decide, I'm with you." "I know. And that's what makes this easier." Months passed. The foundation grew. Madison's relationship with her mother slowly, carefully began to mend. They met for coffee occasionally, talked about safe topics. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. One evening, as Madison and Ethan walked through Central Park, she stopped suddenly. "What?" Ethan asked. She turned to him, a smile spreading across her face. "I'm happy." He grinned. "Good." "No, I mean," she laughed. "I'm really, truly happy. For the first time in my life, I'm not running, I'm not pretending. I'm just here. And it's enough." Ethan pulled her close. "You're more than enough." She kissed him. Right there in the middle of the park, with joggers passing and the city alive around them. When they pulled apart, Ethan's eyes were bright. Ready to go home? Always. As they walked hand in hand, Madison thought about the chain of events that had led her here. A blind date, a panicked escape, a collision in an alley. It had seemed like chaos at the time. But now, looking back, it felt like fate. She'd been running from the wrong things, chasing the wrong dreams. And then, she'd crashed into Ethan. And everything had changed. That night, as they lay in bed, Ethan's voice cut through the darkness. "Madison? Do you ever think about that day? The alley?" She smiled. "All the time." "Me too. What do you think about?" "How lucky I am," he said quietly. "That you ran, that you stayed, that you chose me." Madison rolled over to face him. "I think about how you caught me, in every way." He kissed her forehead. "And I always will." They fell asleep tangled together, the city humming beyond the windows, their story still being written one day at a time. A year into their marriage, Madison received an email that made her heart stop. It was from a literary agent. "She'd been following your story," the email read, "and I think it would make a beautiful book, memoir, romance, whatever you want to call it. People need to hear it." Madison stared at the screen. "A book?" She showed Ethan that night. His reaction was immediate. "You should do it." She blinked. "Really?" He nodded. "Your story is incredible, and not just because I'm in it." She laughed. "But what if people think it's ridiculous? That I'm capitalizing on Ethan took her hands." "Madison, you've spent your whole life being afraid of what people think. Don't let that stop you now." So she said yes. Writing the book was harder than she'd anticipated. Revisiting those early days, the fear, the lies, the moment everything shifted. But it was also cathartic, a way to make sense of the chaos. 6 months later, the manuscript was finished. Another 6 months, and it was published. The response was overwhelming. People loved it. Not because it was about a billionaire, but because it was about someone finding themselves. The book tour was surreal. Madison stood in bookstores and conference halls, talking about her journey, about running, about fear, about love. And every night, Ethan was there, in the audience or backstage, or waiting at the hotel. Always there. One evening, after an event in Chicago, a young woman approached Madison. Her eyes were red, her voice shaking. "Thank you," she said, "for writing this, for showing that it's okay to be scared, that you can start over." Madison hugged her. And in that moment, she realized why she'd written the book. Not for fame, not for recognition, but for this, for connection. 2 years into their marriage, Madison and Ethan sat on the rooftop of their apartment building. It was late. The city glowed below them. "Do you ever miss it?" Madison asked. "Miss what?" "The simplicity. Before all this." Ethan was quiet for a moment. Then he shook his head. "No, because simple wasn't better. It was just easier. And easy isn't what I wanted." She looked at him. "What did you want?" "You," he said simply. "Always you." Madison smiled, tears pricking her eyes. "I love you." "I know," he said, grinning. She shoved him playfully. He caught her hand, pulling her close. "And I love you." More than I thought I was capable of. They sat there, wrapped in each other, the night stretching endlessly around them. Years later, when people asked Madison how they'd met, she'd smile and say, "I ran into him literally, and he caught me." It was the simplest truth, but it was also the biggest one. Because sometimes, the best things in life start with a little chaos, a panicked escape, a collision, a choice to stay instead of run. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you crash into exactly the person you were meant to find. What did you think of their story? Share your thoughts in the comments. On a scale from 0 to 10, what's your rating? Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to follow all our stories. And check out more emotional stories by clicking on the end screen.